My name is Julieanne Quinlan. I am the Curlew Connections Wales Project Manager based in GWCT Cymru. I'm here to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, the wonderful Katie Appleby, who has been working tirelessly over the past year or so, building the relationships and understanding of Curlew in Montgomeryshire. But I won't take any more of her thunder. But before we do, I'm just going to give a bit of quick housekeeping. If you have any questions, queries, or comments throughout this webinar, we will discuss them at the end. And please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A tab or the chat, and myself and Katie will discuss them after this webinar. Without further ado, I would like to pass this on to Katie. Diolch.
Thank you very much, Julia. Diolch. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We'll run through our wonderful season, but I'll start off with just chatting a little bit about the project. Not sure how many people know about the project already, but we'll go into all of that. So let's go. So our wonderful Curlew Connections Wales project. So it's a partnership project. So it's led by GWCT Cymru, which is the company that I work for. And we also work with the Clwydian Range and Dee Valley National Landscapes and Bennod National Park as well. So the three of us all working together with £1 million of funding that's come from the Welsh Government's Nature Networks Fund. And that's given us a budget to work for 3 years on the ground, so up until the end of 2026. So we're going to be following the Wales Action Plan for the recovery of Curlew. So this has been set out by Welsh Government with Gylfinir Cymru, who's the body for Curlew across Wales. So we are working in 3 important Curlew areas. So there are 12 in total that have been set out by Welsh Government for us to work across, to be worked across Wales. And we are working in 3 areas. So ICA 5, which is up in the north, South Clwyd Mountains and Dee Valley, ICA 9 in the middle, which is Montgomeryshire and covers North Radnorshire, and ICA 12, which is the Usk Catchment and Llangwrs Lake. So there's 3 of us working underneath the wonderful Julieanne. So first up is Sam Kenyon, who is working in important area, Curlew Area 5. So this is the map slightly a little bit more zoomed in, easier to see. So Sam's working all across this area and has been doing sort of the same thing as myself this season. So her and her team were able to locate 42 territories this season, which is an amazing number. For our first season on the ground. She located 7 nests and managed to get 4 of those protected as well. There is lots more that they've done on the ground, lots of public engagement and things as well, which I'll go on to a little bit later. And then Roisin, who's down in Bwysig in the south. So Roisin's working in important Curlew Area 12, and she had a really good year this year as well, working, finding 15 territories. 8 nests were located across their area as well, and they managed to protect 7 of those. We know they've definitely got 6 confirmed that fledged, and we've potentially 10 with others, but just not confirmed sightings. So our project has a lot of themes and a lot of things we need to achieve as part of our what is set out by Welsh Government and with the funding. So across all 3 areas, we're doing lots of surveying and monitoring, so understanding what is on the ground already and what we can hopefully work with to understand a little bit more about curlew populations in our areas. So doing nest protection on nests that we find, using things like AI detection and thermal drones, which I'll go on to a little bit later. Doing predator control as well, so targeted predator control at where we know we've got curlew nesting and expanding out around those areas. And also over winter, and sort of our jobs at the moment is doing some habitat improvements, so making the areas where these curlew are using to breed, and just trying to increase their habitat and make it a little bit more suitable for them. We're also doing lots of engagement, so things like this webinar this evening, chatting to lots of people about what we do and why we're doing it. So engaging with local and national audiences, collaborating with farmers and land managers, local communities, making lots of events and going to events as well. So we often have stands and things. All three of us have done lots of events over the last, especially few months, like Royal Welsh Show and the littler shows that we have going on in our areas. We've also done lots of educational initiatives as well. So we have gone into some schools and done talks with kids and activities, but also we have some boxes at the moment as well that can go out to schools and care homes as well, which can encourage kids and absolutely anybody and everybody that's interested and around to understand a little bit more about curlew, see some fake eggs that have been produced and a nest, and really engage and try and connect with people a different way with curlew as well. So another area we do is skills development as well. So at the start of the season, we all did some volunteer training days where we spoke with lots of people that were interested in doing a little bit of management or monitoring for us, and we could tell them what to look for with curlew, so how to identify a curlew, what a curlew sounds like, what we want to try and find out this season. So we were able to do lots of training for that, and as we have done in schools and things, chatting with kids and teaching kids what a curlew sounds and looks like. And then also for farmers and land managers and people on the ground doing conservation management and predator control training as well. So also knowledge sharing. We're really keen to share with everybody what we've learned, what we're learning, what's gone well, what hasn't gone so well, and why that is. And hopefully we can build a picture in each of these three areas as to what's going on, and work with other areas and projects that have done this already. So kind of got a little bit more of an idea and a step ahead of us. So our key messages is to really hit home how crucial it is for curlew at the moment. Across Wales, curlew are predicted to be extinct by 2033, so just 9 years' time, and that's with no interventions now. So we really need to do something to make sure that we can really try and boost the populations back up. So across all three areas, we're working from a field up approach. We're all really dedicated to getting to know our farmers and making sure that our farmers are on our side and love curlew. I've not met a farmer that doesn't love curlew, so that's been a huge help that they're a great species that people like. It does give you a little bit of a starting point as you're heading into a farm. Upskilling the community, as I've mentioned, curlew identification, survey techniques and habitat improvements, and using these things to really increase what our communities know about curlew, and that can sort of live on if the project ends. Fingers crossed there are other people that could sort of carry that forward. Practical interventions, so nest finding, electric fencing, ongoing monitoring, and as I said earlier, using technology as well. So really using anything and everything we can to make sure that we're understanding what's happening to the birds on the ground. We're really lucky with the £1 million of financial support that we can support landowners and farmers. So where the work we're doing may slightly impact them, or there are curlew, so chicks, or a nest in a particular field that they may want to cut or graze, we're really lucky that we have funding to support them with that, and we can pay them for delayed cutting or grazing. And targeted predator control. So in each area we've had a predator control officer that's worked during the season, and that's targeting areas where we've got dense areas of either curlew nests or chicks, and working out from those areas to try and reduce the pressures on any predation for the nests or the chicks. So as I mentioned, the farmer support, so what we're able to offer. So we have funding to support farmers with curlew on their land or adjacent to their land. So they get participation payments, so allowing us access to have a look for curlew nests, or tracks. Sometimes there's roads that are on their land that could just get us slightly closer to having a look. We also give payments for the nest fencing, so where we put in that electric fencing to take that space away from the farmer, could potentially reduce the grazing slightly. We also can pay them for that. And as I mentioned, the delayed cutting and grazing as well. And during the winter, we are also able to support and provide the creation or maintenance of habitat for curlew as well. So scrape creation and maintenance, scrub management or removal, and rush cutting and bracken control as well. So things that are going to clear these areas and really open it up and create a nice habitat for the curlew. So a little bit of curlew identification. I'm sure many people actually know what a curlew looks like that have come this evening, because you usually have the people, but just in case we've got any newbies to curlew, they're a beautiful bird. They are a very distinctive bird known for their call, which I did hope to have an audio, but it didn't seem to be working before we came in. So that'll be a little task after this to go and have a listen to a curlew call. But on the ground, it's that distinctive long decurved bill that we look for. The males are slightly shorter than the females, and the females tend to be a little bit bigger as well. The fine dark lines down their neck and breast doesn't often stand out unless you've got really good lighting, but if you're able to get a really good look like this, it's a lot easier. They've got long grey legs. Even as chicks, their legs seem to be ridiculously long for the size of their bodies, and they've got barring on the backs and on their flanks, so down their backs, as you can sort of just about see in this photo of a male, although not one in Montgomeryshire or Radnorshire. This is a Northern Ireland one, just to put a little bit different one in there. So this is our curlew calendar that was created by one of our wonderful comms and engagement officers this year, working with a company. So a little bit more background to curlew. So they are ground nesting birds. So they form a scrape on the ground, which is literally the adult male scraping away at the ground to remove the vegetation, and then that's where the eggs go. Sometimes there's a little bit of grass laying around the eggs, but not always. We've had some very messy nests this year, which has been quite interesting. So they nest in open landscapes, on farmlands and in uplands. They're very varied habitats, and we're noticing that a lot more, especially between the three areas. It's quite nice that we can compare the different habitats and sites that the curlew are choosing. So curlew migrate, as it shows in the calendar. So they come back to their breeding grounds end of February, March time, and then they start to build out their territories, nesting and incubation time during April and May, and then chick rearing. And then hopefully when those chicks fledge, they head back to the coast as well. But they are very site faithful to both their wintering and breeding habitats. From the data that has been built up, now we're starting to use more GPS tags across the whole of the UK and further afield. So we're starting to understand that they do come back year on year, even if they're failing and losing their chicks, which is really interesting that they are so site faithful to these areas. And they usually lay between 3 and 5 eggs, so it can be quite a good clutch. So the biggest problem at the moment with curlew is we're not getting enough chicks to fledge. So curlew are laying eggs. They are getting some eggs through to hatch, but they're not getting enough chicks to fledge. So in order to sustain the population, curlew only need 1 chick every 2 years. At the moment, we're getting about 1 chick every 5 years, 6 years some cases. So it's a real reduction in how many chicks are actually fledging, and that's where we're starting to see these numbers decrease. So on to our 2024 season. We were really lucky this year to start off quite well, and this is where I was working. So I mentioned Sam and Roisin earlier, working the other 2 sites, and then I'm working in Montgomeryshire and North Radnorshire. So I've spent my season of not very sunny spring and summer that we have had, very wet and windy, but traipsing all around Montgomeryshire and North Radnorshire, trying to understand where we have curlew and what they're doing. So covering, as you can see, quite a large area of 152 or nearly 153,000 hectares, 100,000 hectares. So it's a large area that you can imagine takes a long time, but I was really lucky, really good team around me, also working with our nest finder, our predation officer, and then the rest of the GWCT team when they were able to help as well. So the first start of the season was trying to find where on earth these curlew were. So we were really lucky to get a couple of bits of information from some local ornithologists, previous surveys and reports that had been done. So working with Biz down in the south, who were able to give us lots of sightings that had been reported previously. So using these to start building up a little bit of a map. And farmers were a huge help, chatting with lots of local farmers, and had one family of farmers that I was able to go between a son, an uncle and a brother that all had curlew on their land. So farmers were key for this. One of our other farmers, I turned up on his doorstep, very hopeful and asking for lots of information, and he was amazing. And luckily I was able to confirm that I'm not just somebody going looking for eggs. I am here to actually support the curlew and protect them as well. And yeah, we found 3 nests on his land this year, which was brilliant. And he also got chicks to fledge there as well. So it was a really productive area and brilliant farmer, and lots of locals as well, of course. We're looking for anybody and everybody that sees or hears a curlew to let us know, because that's the only way we can know. If we don't know where they are, we are not going to just stumble upon them a lot of the time. And also myself and Paul, our nest finder, doing lots of walks and moseying around all the fields and footpaths of Montgomeryshire and North Radnorshire to try and find out where suitable habitat was and if there were any curlew there. So we managed to find 50 territories across ICA 9, which was really good for our first season. So we define a territory of where we've had 2 adults or at least 1 adult seen displaying or being quite territorial about an area. So not just a one-off sighting, it's usually we've seen them a few times in that area, and they tend to be a little bit protective of that area as well. So using that behaviour, we're able to determine whether we think there might be nesting. So these are some of our lovely nests we had this year, and we were really lucky. Paul was absolutely brilliant, and together with Paul, myself and James, coming with the drone from GWCT as a contractor, we've been able to locate 23 nests this year. 11 of those unfortunately were predated very early in the season. We had 2 nests that were abandoned, and 10 of those that hatched, which was good. We were happy with that. It's a good start. So these are some of the other nests, and that was the first nest we found with the drone as well. So once all the eggs have been laid, they are then incubated for 4 weeks. So that's a really long period of time. Eggs and adults can become extremely vulnerable in that time, both ground and avian predators. We've got a lot of them around, and we, as you can tell by losing 11 of our nests, we know we had a big problem with predation, and the adults will sit extremely tight to those nests, especially later on in incubation, and will fend off any risks to their eggs. So you'll often see them chasing off things like crows and buzzards and kites when they've got nests around. So nest protection. So we got out 11 protection measures to our nests across Montgomeryshire and North Radnorshire, and this is the team putting out some electric fencing. We even tried it with a scythe to see how suitable that was, which was very good, very entertaining to watch, and it was actually really productive, which was really good to know. So 2 of our nests that were protected were abandoned. One unfortunately was during a silage cut, so the area around the nest, there was quite a large area left even around the nest electric fence. So we do a 20 by 20 metre squared electric fence. And there was another 5 metres on top of that, and unfortunately the pair abandoned. We had 2 nests that were predated. One adult was also predated, unfortunately, and then 1 nest we removed within the hour as the adult hadn't gone back on, and 5 of those successfully hatched after all that had gone on. So predation, as I mentioned, we did lose a lot of nests early on. So 10 predated before we could actually get the electric fencing on, and 1 we know was to be a badger, and another one was suspected to be a crow. But we can't determine with all the others, it just depends, and we just didn't get cameras out on those nests early enough. So it's just building those relationships with farmers, trying to understand a little bit more where they are exactly, and then we can get the cameras on them earlier, hopefully next year. So predation control, as I mentioned before, so we do predator control of foxes and crows, which is under the general licence, and that's working around curlew territories and the surrounding area as well to try and not create a vacuum for those. So this was carried out under the general licence, so by our contracted predation control officers, and then working as well with local gamekeepers and land managers that were doing their own predation control for their own reasons, and working together to just try and reduce the numbers and give the curlews a little bit more of a fighting chance. So I also mentioned lots of public engagement, which we have done lots of over the last nearly a year now that I've been in post. So lots of different things that have gone on in all 3 areas. It's been brilliant to see how engaged the kids and the public are in what we're able to do. So a couple of these are from the Rheolwr show, where we had Nico come along and make some curlew puppets, which was really enjoyed by lots of the kids, and lots of other things, other events that we've done, chatting with lots of kids and getting them to dig around for worms and bugs in sand and soil, and get them covered in paint and mud as well, which is a favourite of mine, and then lots of talks and demonstrations as well. So once those eggs have been incubated for 4 weeks, we then get to hatching. So these are a couple of this is sort of the process of hatching. So we don't get all the eggs at the same time. They're laid at different times, so they will hatch slightly differently as well. So this is where I was just checking on a nest. I didn't think they were due to hatch quite that soon, and then there was a little chick sat waiting for me. So then once all 4 chicks have hatched, or even before, the chicks will dry off with the adults, and they are on the move then straight away. And so yeah, 30 chicks hatched from the nest that we located, and then we found an additional 18 chicks that either we had an idea of where they might be, but we didn't find a nest, and then all of a sudden there were chicks, or somewhere we were just driving down the road and I saw a curlew go up for a crow, and I thought, that's odd, let's go have a look, and we found 2 chicks there as well. So the behaviour is a huge thing for us, and understanding that has been a massive benefit. So yeah, 48 chicks that we are aware of that hatched across Montgomeryshire and North Radnorshire this year. So this is the development of the chicks. So as they come out, they are this tiny little fluff ball with these really long legs, and they just hucker down on the floor. They don't, if they feel any form of danger, they will sit as tight as they can to the floor, and mum and dad will go up and try and fend off whatever's there. And as you can see, as they get bigger, they build those flight feathers, and then once they get to that 4 or 5 week stage, fingers crossed, they can fly. So then those predators and things don't become as much of a problem. So once those chicks are on the move, they are feeding themselves, so they're straight off the nest, and they are looking for little bugs, insects, so spiders and absolutely anything on the ground that they can get their bill to. The adults don't feed the chicks, so the adults purely there for protection, and to move them around. They'll often move them to more suitable habitat. And we had a few chicks that moved off quite far from where they nested, so we understand that that may have been where the parents were going to roost, because it's just a little bit more suitable. So this does make them much harder to keep track. They move quite quickly, and they will do they can go a fair distance in the space of a day. So as you can imagine, when we're sat with our binoculars or wandering around the hills trying to find where these chicks have gone, it's not the easiest thing. And as the vegetation grows, and the chicks don't grow quite as quick as the vegetation, so it can be really hard to spot them. But as the last image showed, it's about 4 or 5 weeks until these chicks have grown their flight feathers and are able to actually take off into the skies. So again, this is a very vulnerable time for curlew. These tiny chicks can't defend themselves from anything that tries to take them. And unfortunately, at times they come across a path of a fox or other species that would take them. And unfortunately, that's where we're losing these chicks and not getting them to fledge. So other ways we can try and keep an eye on where the curlew are cameras. So we were really lucky this year that GWCT have got a partnership with Liverpool John Moores University and their conservation AI system. So we were able to give them lots of footage of curlew, and they've developed a software that can recognise the curlew. So we were able to use their cameras on the nests this year as well. So it was a little bit later in the year that we were able to get the cameras, and then we were able to put them out on nests. And this meant we could get a notification when we've got these, when we've got movement, and if it's recognising it's curlew or even a curlew chick. So this is one of our adults coming back in on the nest. You can see it's got numerous aquata, that adult going back in. And it was also able to identify a chick as well. And it was very exciting the first time we had a chick actually come through and say that it's seen a chick. So we also were able to see chicks at times. We had a few very rare sightings, which were amazing, of course. Seeing the adults and the chicks walking along together, and also crossing roads. Not a busy road. Usually if I show people this, they panic that the chick is crossing the road or try and make a joke, but I've not got the punchline for that yet either. But no, they were perfectly safe, and people living down this road are very aware that they're there. So we're coming up very slowly, thankfully. And then we did have, sorry, there seems to be a slide missing there. So another way that we've monitored curlew this year is the use of the drone, and the drone was extremely useful for us. So covering such a large site, it was hard work keeping track of who was where and what they were doing, and trying to get that done within a day or even a week could be quite hard. But when we were able to have the GWCT drone team come out and survey for us, that was a huge help. It's less stress on me because we can determine exactly what's on the ground at the time. So you may have already seen this footage, but this is the recent drone surveying that has been released by the GWCT Cymru team, and this was the first nest that was found. Surveyed from 100 metres in the air with curlew sat on, more than happy, not bothered by the drone up above her, even taking grass and popping it in, which was incredible to see. And then the lovely eggs. And this was another nest that was located as well. So this is this was the same nest, sorry. So this was once the adult had flown off, and this was disturbed by us purposely trying to see how many eggs there were, so we could sort of determine how many were likely to hatch. And that also shows you how far away we could be. So these are some lovely chicks wandering around. So this is within an electric fence. We were really lucky that turned up and the chicks had hatched. And rather than me having to sit in the corner of a field waiting for the adults to calm down that I'm there, or try and hide somewhere and maybe catch a glimpse of seeing a chick, we can put the drone up and see the chicks straight away. So we have a split screen of thermal imaging and the zoom camera as well. So it's got 200 times zoom that you can zoom in and see those chicks as accurately as we could. And this shows what we found, that first nest where we had chicks. So you can see the footprints of myself and my colleague going in and moving the wire, and all that movement that's chick and adult. So it's quite interesting to see how much of an indentation that they make in the grass. So there were 2 chicks just slightly south of that lower adult, and we found it quite interesting watching one of the adult curlew leading a sheep away. It's obviously a little bit worried at how close that sheep was getting. And as we know, sheep and cattle are very interested in anything and everything that's going on around them, so we'll follow. And then this is a little bit where we were scanning. So we had a curlew in this area that had nested, although it had unfortunately been predated. And we were just scanning to see if there was any movement a few weeks later, just to see if any of the adults had tried to nest, and we found a fox instead. Another of my favourite clips we got with the drone of an adult just giving those chicks a little brood and a little cuddle to warm up. It's about 5:30 in the morning, very cold morning. The sun wasn't quite up enough to warm us up, but all the curlew, obviously. And it was really nice to see how relaxed they were and able to actually see their behaviour as natural as the adult brooding the chicks. You can see she does turn her head to look up. She's aware we're there, the drone's there, but not bothered or feeling threatened. We got lots of footage of them moving around and eating beforehand. And chick number 3 popping in. So yeah, it's a little bit of an overview of what the team were able to find and do this year. Hopefully learn more and find more next year, because it was really interesting what we were able to find. A little bit more drone footage to show the 2 sides. So these were the first chicks we found with the drone. And we were able to locate the adult really quickly. Took us a little while to get our eye in for seeing the chicks. But now I watch these and go, oh, it's right there. How could I not see it at the time? But there was a bit of practice involved in that. And so just as it scans across, chick comes in just on the left-hand side. So I can't see it overly well on the left-hand side, but you can just see a slightly darker patch moving along. So that's the adult, and then the chick just to the left. And then once those chicks have wandered around and eaten all of the worms and spiders and everything that's all over the place, we get to fledging, hopefully. So this was one that fledged, and this was one of the chicks from the farmer I mentioned earlier that had 3 nests on his land. Just managed to catch a glimpse of one of them flying. So we had 8 chicks this year that we were able to confirm that fledged. And 3 potentially additional chicks. We just didn't see them flying, but it was very late on that they were still on the ground. We were also really lucky that Paul, our nest finder, also rings with the Mid Wales ringing group, and we were able to chat with them about doing getting some chicks colour-ringed on their project. So we've had 4 lovely little chicks that have been colour-ringed. So these are their colourings. So if you see any colourings, make sure to report them. So the Mid Wales Ringing Group have got a site where you can put in their colourings, but absolutely anywhere, even if they're slightly different to these, making sure that you're letting somebody know if you're seeing, even if it's just not a glimpse, you haven't seen the 2A that's on the leg. If you've just noted that it's got a green upper and a yellow lower, that's brilliant to just be able to start to understand where they're moving to as well, because we'd be able to understand whose ringing scheme it was. So we're really lucky, and it was really handy to be able to use the drone as well to locate the chicks for that. Although some of them were slightly more confident on their wings than we had first suspected. So it was a little bit harder than we thought. So hopefully next year, if we're able to do the same, we'll get out a little bit earlier to get the chicks. But we also managed to ring a few smaller chicks, although they weren't big enough for colourings. There were 2 chicks from another brood that were metal ringed. So all's good, because we're able, if we see those chicks again, or if they're ever caught again, we'll know exactly that they're still alive and where they're moving to. And this was one of our lovely chicks. Luckily, the farmer was coming along, so disturbed the chick owner, and I managed to get footage of it fledging. Of it, well, so. Diolch everybody, and I hope that's been a nice roundup of what we've done this year, and fingers crossed I can see some of your questions and any questions anybody else has got to add.
Diolch yn fawr, Katie, da iawn. It puts a smile on my face to see just to actually get that footage of fledging. I think it's quite symbolic of all the work that you've done this year, and as well as partners. It's you work hard and you get a reward for it. So thank you again, and I hope you all enjoyed Katie's talk. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A chat as well. We do have questions coming in now. We have a question from Graham. Katie, have you been able to satellite tag or leg flag any of the birds following their movements? Well, I hope we've answered part of that question, but in relation to satellite tags, we have not at all.
No, we weren't able to this year. No, we are looking at potential options and funding for next year, potentially within GWCT. That would be, but it would be amazing to branch that out to cover the 3 areas. So we're all chatting with lots of different organisations and people that can do the tagging, because that's the main thing, is having the endorsements to be able to tag. But it would be amazing to understand where our birds are going, and also be able to see what's going on in their winter habitats as well, because we know that they're not as suitable as they used to be. We're losing a lot of them. The habitats are changing at both ends of their breeding and of their life cycle. So yeah, it'd be amazing to understand more, but we haven't this year. Fingers crossed for the future.
I am. Olivia's just popped in the chat here. I missed the beginning of this, so sorry if you said, do the electric fences ever accidentally affect the curlew/chicks?
Not that I know of. So I have always, I say always, this year and last year, lift the bottom wire of the electric fence just to give a little bit more room underneath. But we tend to leave the electric fence in place while they're moving around. And as far as I can tell, we've not had any chicks when collecting up the electric fencing. They've been able to get in and out really well, even to the footage from the drone where the footprints were around the edge and then you could see the curlew movement. We'd not lifted the wire until after the chicks had hatched, and because of the movement and the change in vegetation, we could see that the chicks had moved outside of the nest themselves anyway. So I think they're able to get down low enough underneath it to get through.
That's a good question about electric fencing. I mean, there's definitely an art to it, I would say, and to get it right. So we did, from previous projects and speaking to other people, Katie did kind of reach out and see what's the best practice for fencing, because everybody does do things slightly differently. How many wires do we use again, Katie?
So we did 5 wires this year, which worked really well. We didn't have any problems with anything getting into the electric fences. But yeah, it's something we're constantly looking and reviewing as to whether that's what's best, or chatting with a lot of people as well that have been using different things.
Awesome. We have another question here from Spencer. To what extent are the sites monitored on or near game shooting locations?
So anywhere we have sightings of curlew or we have predicted areas, we've not necessarily looked at it in terms of game shooting comparison. My main focus this year is where are they and what are they doing? But it would be interesting as the project develops to start understanding what's going on around the habitats as well, and then sort of monitor that closer, I think. But yeah, as I say, at the moment, that hasn't been a focus for monitoring comparative to sites specifically where there's game management going on. We haven't had, there were 2 sites where we got in touch with where they do shoots, and as far as we were aware, they didn't have any curlew. They've never had any sightings of curlew there. So we'll just keep monitoring those areas.
Great, thank you. Another question from Graham. Over here in the east of England, curlew from airfield project satellite tagged birds are turning up hundreds of miles away from where we have been releasing them. 4 in Spain and 1 in Southern Ireland, 1 in Southern France. It's a good point, Graham. I'm sure Katie can elaborate on the migration and how little we know of curlews. Well, we know that they are migratory, but their drive and why they go to specific migration and how far they go is quite interesting. Katie, I don't know if you want to elaborate on perhaps where you were last year and where we are curious to see where our birds go as well this year.
Yeah, definitely. That's where satellite tags are making a huge difference. The smallest little things on the back of a bird, and they give us so much data and so much information. It's been really interesting hearing all the projects where they've been using them and how far or even how short a distance that some of the birds travel. I know that there's some in the south of Wales that only travel a couple of miles between their wintering habitat and their breeding habitat. And then you've got some that fly thousands of miles just to head back over to Ireland, where Julieanne's from. That's obviously much better soil over there for the winter. But it's really interesting seeing all the movements around and the development as well with the technology. The lighter they get, the more we can use them and the more suitable they are for younger chicks as well. So we can get them on earlier. So I know they do a lot of radio tagging on chicks to monitor where the chicks go just during while they're on the site. But it's the GPS tags that will actually track them once they leave that area, because it's not as easy to follow them as you can imagine. I remember chatting with Rachel Taylor from the BTO. They tagged, and don't quote me, but 3 chicks from one brood, and 2 of them went to Ireland down near Cork, and 1 of them went to France. So we're constantly learning, and we don't know what it is in them that decides where they go and where they choose to go each for both wintering and breeding habitat. But the more we tag, the more we can begin to sort of build a picture as to what they're doing.
Right, thank you. I'm going to now move on to the Q&A chat because people have populated both. So we have a question from Megan. Were the shells of the predated eggs sent off to Sheffield Uni project for analysis?
No, I still have them, but they haven't been sent off, no. But that would be really good to do. I don't know whether it would be too late once they were found. I don't know how, but I'd have to definitely have a chat with them. But that's what we're looking into next year. We did have, of the nests that were abandoned, it would have been really good as well to send off. So we're able to, I know down in Banai, they managed to send off some eggs. I know there's a little bit of a delay in sending them, so there was a little bit of, they'd gone not so great past their sort of great stage, but they'd managed to have a look at them and see at what stage that those eggs had failed. So definitely for abandoned eggs, but yeah, we will look into doing that more with the predated eggs as well to see if we can understand, if we haven't got a camera on them, exactly what's potentially predated those as well.
Megan added further, where were the eggs from the abandoned nests taken to and hatched out?
So they weren't, we didn't have any licensing, so we aren't doing any head starting or taking any eggs. So we just needed to confirm that the eggs had been abandoned, and that was through using cameras, so monitoring the nests post what we assumed was an abandonment. So especially the nests where the silage was cut around the nest. I was there the day they were cutting. There was a lot of action from the adults at the time, and then once I wasn't able to be there once the cutting was finished, and then when I went back the next day there were no adults. Alarm calling, and when I went into the nest there was no adult on the nest, so we then just monitored over the next few days and realised that they weren't coming back to those eggs, unfortunately. But we didn't have the capacity to take those eggs had it been early enough. But even had we known, we probably wouldn't have taken them thinking that they'd been abandoned, just because they could have been left too long already, and unfortunately being unviable. So yeah, that's again something for those that do the head starting. At the moment we're just focusing what's going on in the areas, understanding our populations and what's happening to them, and then obviously we could look potentially at that in the future.
Diane. Yeah, Megan, just following your comment there, Megan just said, I may have misunderstood, were the eggs abandoned, were they failed, or were they alive and able to be head started? So they were failed eggs. I hope just if we make that clear. Yeah, so these eggs were, the adults had fled the nest and didn't continue incubating, which meant that they would have been failed. I don't think we have any more questions, Katie. Simon Boyd sends us thanks, as well in the comments. I think, we may have one more. One moment. Bev has just popped in here. After National Curlew Day, I struggle to hear any curlew in the area of Bannabachainog, but I was lucky to see 30 curlew on the July 6th feeding on the shores of Pwllheli. That's very interesting.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, that is interesting, definitely. You'll have to get in touch with Roisin and go and do some volunteering and monitoring with her, and then see some more about Banai.
And Tara just added here, what habitat management did you carry out, and how close to nest sites?
So we in Montgomeryshire haven't done any yet. We're just chatting with farmers at the moment as to what they're interested in doing. So we have a few farmers that are really interested in adding a scrape, and bracken management is probably a big one, and then some rush cutting as well, hopefully. So they will be on areas where we've had curlew feeding or nesting nearby, so that creating these areas and removing thick areas of rush just to make it a little bit more suitable, especially for chicks. So when the rush gets really dense, it's a lot harder for the chicks to move through. They tend to stand out a lot more as they're more clumped. So cutting that down, bringing up a little bit of a different variation in sward height, which is absolutely perfect for curlew, meaning it's a little bit more suitable for the chicks, and then scrapes and ponds and things that make these wet areas, increase invertebrates, and give them lots of feeding areas. So they will be around where we know we've got curlew, just to really try and boost those areas, and then any additional areas we think would be suitable, or where we may have seen curlew but we don't think they potentially nested. Yeah, just fingers crossed we can put it in all the right places, but working from what we know of where curlew are at the moment. But as I say, we haven't done anything to date. It's hopefully over the next coming weeks we'll get out on the ground.
Just final two questions here. Verity just popped in the chat here. Eggs sent to Sheffield Uni from Gwent were found to be fertile, but the embryos had stopped developing at different stages of incubation. So this is Verity's working down Gwent, adjacent to ICA 12. And she's also sent yeah, she sent some of her eggshells down or up to Sheffield, should I say. Thank you, Verity. Dave Whitrick, is the Curlew Country project still going? So the Curlew Country project is in Shropshire, just over the border, neighbouring Montgomeryshire. If you contact the Curlew Country email at curlewcountry@gwct.org.uk, you can get in contact with the team there with any questions. And lastly, from Graham, CC didn't apply for a license this year, but they are in touch with Natural England about next year's. Okay, great. There we go. Thank you, Graham. I'm conscious of time, but to wrap things up now, I just want to thank Katie for coming on this gloomy grey evening to share her wet summer results, and I'm delighted to say that we've had fledgings in the first year, and that is a kudos to you and the team in Montgomeryshire. So diolch. Lastly, just to remind anyone, this webinar is recorded and it will be available on the GWCT Cymru YouTube channel should you wish to share that with anyone who would be interested in hearing what we discussed today. So thank you, Katie, and I'll leave you all to have a nice evening.
Diolch, everyone.
Diolch, thank you.